So my daughter's she's 13, right? And she's like my favorite person in the world, and she thinks that I'm like completely like the nerdiest person ever.
Right.
And I'm always trying to make jokes, and she never thinks that they're good jokes. And so
have to agree with her on that.
yeah, right. I mean, it's pretty clearly obvious that I have no sense of humor. And so Christmas, I get up and I open her card, and it's like 4 out of 5 people get money for Christmas, but you're the lucky 1 out of 5 or whatever. And she got me a book, and it was called How to Be Funny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Really good.
Thanks.
I know, right? Totally there. I was all over that. So
how is it?
I'm on chapter 3.
Are you?
Yeah.
You do seem funnier this week.
I know. It's the homework. I'm studying. There are word problems. There are worksheets. You have to really. There's some algebra involved.
Oh, man,
it's hard.
I'm out.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a lot of math.
So what is it? What is it about though? Like what's?
It's like essentially it's like this. It's like, okay, to be funny, you've got to have a point of view, and you've got to have a target. But James Carville says, not that he wrote the book, but he's quoted in the book a lot, that that the target has to be like either yourself or somebody like rich or powerful. You can't target like.
Oh yeah, you don't want to dump on kick a guy when he's down.
Right, exactly. You don't target the weak.
Right.
So that's
a great point. Yeah,
no, it is a good point.
Just that, if you could follow that.
That's right. So I'm trying to target up.
That's why you've been putting me down.
That's right. I just look at you and I think, Andrew, you're so powerful.
Mitch so aggressive tonight.
Yeah, that's exactly why.
That's funny.
All
Hey,
right.
Did you watch the Apple event today?
No. The
they
iWatch.
Yeah, what do you think about the iWatch? Are you going to get one?
I think I'm not going to get one yet.
Is this going to be like Google Glass type thing, or do you think people will really buy into
No,
that?
I think, they bought into Google, anybody that had $1,500 lying around.
Right.
But you know what happened with Google Glass? They pulled it off the market first.
I mean, it just looks so dorky.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to...
I used to wear that all the time. That's why Emma got me the How to Be Funny, because I would just wear Google Glass around the house, and I'd be like, look at me. I'm a awesome Silicon Valley. But they gave it to the people that run Nest. You know Nest? The thermostat thing?
Yeah.
Google runs Nest.
Yeah.
And that's who runs Google Glass now.
Interesting.
So I don't know, but that's mysterious.
Yeah. What do you think the implications for emergency management are for the Apple Watch?
It means that I can call somebody on my freaking watch just like Dick Tracy. That's what
cool.
it means. It means I can be like, I need a helicopter evac.
Yes.
Stat.
The Dick Tracy,
I was
ultimate
talking my
emergency
wrist there.
managers.
He really is. He has the nose for it. We should all break our nose just like that, just for Dick Tracy. And we're back.
We're back.
You know what's funny is I think this is our first episode of 2015. Is that right?
Is it really? Has it been that long since we've...
Time has no meaning for me anymore. Yeah, when you have a baby, you don't know what's happening.
Yeah, it has. It's definitely been a while. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you.
It's good to talk emergency management
with
you over the kitchen counter table. Good. Yeah. So we have a good little episode tonight. Episode 10.
Episode 10.
Double digits.
We've done 10 episodes.
They doubted us. They said we would never get to number 10.
And the money just keeps rolling in.
Here we are.
Man.
Seriously.
Making bank.
Cash.
We're like famous. We reached 2,000 downloads. That's not per episode. That is total, baby.
Just the other day, I was walking down the street. Someone recognized me.
Yeah. By your voice? Or just by that Subway ad campaign that we're doing.
Like, do you do the emergency management podcast?
Yeah.
The emergency management. And I was like, yeah, I do.
Yeah. No, I was walking through the crowd the other day and somebody like came up and like licked their finger and touched me on the shit. And they were just like, I just wanted to touch you. I just wanted to get close to emergency management greatness.
I'm just glad we could bring rock star status to the emergency management world.
We need that. You know? We do. Yeah. We need the humility. And that's how we get the humility is by becoming more famous. That's how you get more humble.
Yes.
Kanye proved that.
So we got a good show. We're going to talk a little bit about Ebola. We're going to talk about a train disaster in West Virginia and in Canada. We're going to review The Last Man on Earth, one of our new favorite shows this season, and a couple other We got a suggestion from a listener, actually, too. We're going to talk about.
We're not going to follow it.
Are
we
we
going to actually follow this?
Yeah, I mean, probably not this episode since we've just thrown this together in the last 10 minutes.
Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow.
But it's a good suggestion. I think we should.
Okay. And when we talk about train derailments, we're going to really break that down. I got a listener suggestion that they liked it when we broke out disasters, when we really dug into the weeds.
Break it down.
That's right. So we're going to do a disaster breakdown of West Virginia train derailment versus the Lac Magantic rail disaster. I said that completely wrong for all you French Canadian listeners out there. Sorry. I'm going to work on that before the end of the episode.
We're also going to do that segment in a Canadian accent, both of us.
Oh, okay. Eh?
Okay. Don't you mean okay?
Is that Canadian?
I don't know.
We
can't do that. Scratch that idea. Okay. Scratch that. We're going to scratch that.
We need Rick Moranis and that other guy who's the Canadian. Okay. So moving on. Let's start with Ebola. That's you, right?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know if you were going to play music.
Oh, right. I am. No, I totally am. And here's Andrew with the news.
If I'm going to beatbox with the music, I kind of need to be on beat with the music, I think.
Yeah, but this mic setup, it's not going to happen. We're on a half-second delay right now. So if we seem crazy, it's because our brains can't keep up with the processing of the half-second delay.
Are you actually hearing your voice? I don't even have the headphones in because I can't handle hearing my voice on delay.
I can't handle hearing your voice at all.
That's true. That's true.
I need a rim shot for that.
Yeah, thank you. Man, that book is really working.
It really is, right? I'm just shooting zingers all the time.
All right, segue into a devastating disease called Ebola. Nice segue. We just wanted to mention that Ebola is still out there, and there have been a lot of reports that say that it's ticking down, which maybe overall is. But Nature magazine published a very interesting article about the devastating consequences that Ebola has had on maternal health, and it's talked about this stories of pregnant women coming into the hospital but not being treated because of fear that they may have Ebola. So, for me, it was just a reminder that this is still going on. Over 23,000 people have been infected by it. Almost 10,000 people have died from it worldwide. And one thing I haven't seen as much coverage on are the secondary effects of something like this on maternal health, that I think will be felt a long, long time, years into the future with some of these countries. Yeah, so some stats on that. So in Liberia's last Ebola case just got out of the hospital this week. We're recording March 10th, 2015. But cases in both Guinea and Sierra Leone have actually spiked. And the worrisome part about that is only half of those cases are from known contacts. So when you're working on a disease like Ebola, what you do is you treat everybody that's sick, and then you track all of their contacts to watch the contacts, see if they get sick. And so if everybody that gets sick is one of those contacts, then you know that you've got every illness, right? That every sick person is a person you're treating. But if only half of the people that are getting sick are from those contacts, it means that there are other reservoirs of illness out there in villages far off the kind of beaten path that you're not reaching. Wow. So there could be other sources of the outbreak over there. So in those two countries, it's possible that it's going to get bigger before it gets smaller. Yeah. So this is still happening. It's still something to prepare for. Do you think that this will cause a new resurgent in kind of bio preparedness here in the States? Absolutely. I mean, especially if you look at, first we've had an incredibly small number of cases in the United States, right? We've had one fatality, but the United States has spent just now in the last month something like $40 million of grant funding is going out for healthcare preparedness. Wow. And it's interesting, they just ran a study that the cost of this in West Africa, something like $4 billion, whereas, and here's a metric for preparedness for you, if they'd spent $1.6 billion over the last 10 years building up the healthcare infrastructure, a lot of that could have been averted. Wow. So yeah, I think that we are gonna, in the States, spend a lot more than is warranted by the immediate threat to us, but hopefully that money will give us other benefits and other kinds of infectious diseases. Right, and hopefully it won't just be Ebola focused, right? It'll be more infectious disease preparedness focused, right? I think so. It should be. A lot of it's going to go for things, I think, like isolation wards, that kind of stuff. Yeah. It is stuff that will help other infectious diseases, I think. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'm, from the great state of Texas, and Texas just recently celebrated
country?
It used to be a country, actually, Mitch. So yeah, it used to be a country.
Oh my God.
That's why we can fly our flag at the same height as the United States flag.
Do you know that it has a Congress? Texas has its own elected Congress?
I know this.
No. Oh, really? Okay. Well, sorry. I'm going to just I'm saluting you right now.
Thank you. That's not the Texas salute, but I appreciate your rigor in that, and I will accept it. So I found one of the Texas Twitter feeds I follow tweeted this awesome video from 1960. It's an Austin, Texas civil defense preparedness video, and we'll post it on our website. And I think we have a clip of it, right?
That's right. That's right. Here's the first clip.
Bob Gooding is reading the Safeway commercial in the noon news on KTBC radio when an alarm and radio control sounds. Following a procedure long since memorized, Gooding switches on the Conrad amplifier provided for air raid warnings. A voice tells him
okay. So
that clip could go on forever.
Yeah, no, the funny thing about this is literally like 12 minutes into the video, and the 12 minutes before this have been setting the stage for this nuclear bomb going off, and it's like 12 minutes of
Timmy is walking his dog.
Exactly. Bob's delivering milk. Nancy's doing the ironing.
Sarah is getting her hair done at a local salon.
Yeah, it's all like gender focused. All none of the women are working. They're all getting their hair done.
Children are swimming.
Nancy's preparing dinner for her husband Bob, who arrives in 6 hours. But yeah, so it's it's a little bit hard to watch. It's interesting though because it's from the 60s. But the funny thing about it is when you get to the actual information when the bomb goes off and it says what the people are doing, it's actually pretty good advice. It's like, it shows a family that has a plan. They know what to do. They see the bright flash of life. They drop to the floor. They go into their basement. They have supplies. They involve the family members in staying busy while they shelter in place.
Here's a quick clip for when that part kicks off.
In the huge fallout shelter room beneath the Department of Public Safety building, the state civil defense team is assembling.
Yeah, so it's the state civil defense thing. That's the funny thing. It's even before ICS and emergency management.
But I guess here's the thing. Do you, Andrew, as an emergency manager, feel that we've wasted the last 50 years of preparedness?
I kind of feel they were more prepared for this back then.
Do we suck more than they did in 1960?
I think maybe when it comes to nuclear preparedness, we kind of do. I mean, the alert here was I think these were ICBMs that were. They were like, ICBMs have been reported over northern Canada coming, to the southern United States. Yeah. So, you definitely don't see things like this anymore. I mean, they even, this shows a story of a sad guy who decides to get in his car and drive away out of Austin because he sees this bomb hit. And the last scene of this video is him like collapsing to the ground, crawling because he's trying to get away. He did the wrong thing. He didn't shelter in place. He got on the road.
What's funny about that is, so this is 1960 Austin. So just last year, the major laboratory, I'm forgetting the new Brookhaven, and working with a couple of the preparedness centers, released new nuclear preparedness toolkits.
Right.
And they did this whole analysis, and they said that the number one thing you could do after a nuclear weapon to stay safe was shelter in place for 48 to 72 hours until the plume passed.
Exactly.
And everybody was like, ooh, and it had these really awesome 3D diagrams of like apartment buildings and concrete shielding and all that kind of stuff.
Level protection.
And now I feel like they just pulled that out of a vault from 1958, and like they're just basically photocopying it and sending it around to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, but it's true. But that message I feel like isn't really getting out there. And there was such a culture of preparedness when it came to nuclear preparedness in the 60s because the threat was so big.
Right.
I mean, whether in actuality it was big or not, people thought it was a huge threat. So there was a lot of preparedness around for it. And today, we have the threat of like terrorism. We have the threat of hurricanes, but it just doesn't seem as acute as it was back then.
I think that, I just thought of a perfect guest. So we're going to try and have more guests on the podcast coming up. So a lot of places have been working on nuclear communication because the problem is, here's the secret, guys. After a nuclear bomb goes off in your jurisdiction, you're not going to have access to communication for a little while. There's a massive EMP that goes off. You're going to lose a lot of, your radio and telecommunications, maybe internet service. And
internet?
I know the internet might go off for a little while. All you ham radio junkies. And the thing is that what you need to do, if you're not killed immediately in the blast, knock on something, you need to shelter in place. You need to go into a basement. You need to get surrounded by shielding, and you need to lock up and be there for like 72 hours. But it's hard to communicate that after the event. So jurisdictions have been pushing to get that message out, put it on posters and whatever. The problem is it's a little downbeat.
Right.
Nobody wants
Come to New York City where we have shelters. And by the way, if a bomb goes off, here's what to do.
That's right. It's like a happy animated cartoon. But Ventura County, California, it's the only place I know of that was able to do this kind of nuclear bomb shelter in place messaging, and they did it in movie theater. So you'd go to movie theater to watch a movie. One of the previews would be about the possibility of a nuclear weapon going off and what you should do, right? So I think that's awesome. So we got to get a clip. We got to get that guy.
We got to find that.
Okay, here's one I got. So this is from Emergency Management Magazine this week, and everybody wants to know this. It's going to go viral. The number one place in the United States that you do not want to be when a zombie outbreak hits. So 3 guesses. Anybody out there?
The number one place you don't want to be when a zombie, I would say New York City. I'd say right now where I'm sitting, Brooklyn.
Here.
I would not want to be right
Brooklyn
here.
is the safest place from zombies.
I don't know about that.
And it's not New Jersey either. No, none of that. So this team from Cornell University ran a computer simulation. What it did was it started out with 7,000 randomly generated outbreak points. That is where the first zombie would appear all over the country. And what happened is they looked at then the overlap of where you're like most likely to die soonest in the first month. And what they got was that Northeast Pennsylvania was always a place that was going to get overrun.
Northeast
Right,
Pennsylvania.
because it's like right in the middle. There's Philadelphia, there's New York City. There are all of these urban areas clustered around it. So wherever you start, it's near a transportation hub that's going to get there. So like New York City, if it starts in LA, if it's like all West Coast, like Dr. Dre zombies, then it's going to take a little while. I don't know where that came from. And New York City can whatever do defenses, but
Right.
but in Northeast Pennsylvania, you're just within so many travel hubs that one of them is going to fail and it's going to get there.
Interesting. Yeah, it is kind of in the middle of a lot of big cities: New York, Philly, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Syracuse. Yeah.
What we should do is put that on to Northeast Pennsylvania on the website, just with a big bullseye target,
Exactly.
like right over it.
Prepare for the zombies. So the next thing we're going to talk about, we're just going to mention, if you're in New York City, there's a great exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History on the Upper West Side called Nature's Fury, and it's the science of disasters. They have a cool YouTube video that we'll post on our website, but it's great. The little tagline is earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, awesome in their destructive power. These natural events remind us that we are small and vulnerable, and that living on the dynamic planet will always entail risk.
Help me, I'm small and vulnerable.
This is emergency management. This is so cool that they're doing it. We haven't been able to see it yet, but it's something I totally want to do.
Well, we're going to go.
Yeah.
We're going to review it. We're going to have to do it. Maybe we'll even get some live audio, like while we're wandering around in the Natural History Museum.
I think stuff like this, though, is great to increase interest in disaster preparedness. And, they also incorporate a lot of the climate change stuff. Are disasters happening more frequently? Why is that? Why are they happening?
In the San Francisco Science Museum, there is an earthquake exhibit, and you go in a house, and then it takes you through both the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and then the more recent one that we talked about on this show, the Loma Prieta, earthquake, and the whole house like shakes and falls down around you.
Oh, that's cool.
And I thought it was like one of the best examples of this. It was visceral, it was memorable, and it really let you see how much life was disrupted by something like that.
Yeah, it's a shame that emergency management agencies, we're so overtaxed anyway, but it's a shame we can't put on things like this. What a great PR kind of be prepared type thing. Actually, much better than like get a go bag, make sure you have battery,
One of the reasons I got into emergency management, I can't believe I'm telling this story, it's crazy, is when I was a tech consultant, I went to like a county fair. Yeah. Okay. And at the county fair, they had lots of exhibits, and one was like by the local Red Cross, and it was like a mobile home. And what you did is you went in the mobile home, and then it simulated the mobile home being set on fire.
Whoa.
And how you evacuated from it. So you were in this place, and it filled up with smoke, you know what I mean? And there were like lights and sounds and everything. And I came out of that, and I was like, wow, that is awesome.
That is great.
And I thought, wow, this is kind of a great career.
I remember one
Fake
thing
disasters.
when I was a kid. I saw Texas Tech University had this like tornado debris simulator where they shot debris. Like they would shoot 2x4s out of a cannon that would simulate the force of a tornado coming through, and they would lodge it into like, different types of walls. And it was to create, tornado proof buildings. But that was a thing as a kid I saw too. I was like, oh, that's great.
All right, and now we are going to disaster breakdown. So let me just set the scene for this, okay? So here's the thing about what's happening in the country right now. We in North America have discovered oil, right? Everybody knows this at this point. And in particular, what we've done is we have discovered Bakken oil. And the thing about that oil, and this is the same.
Baby got back in oil.
Yeah, that's where the song came from. Is that did everybody know that? The Bakken Formation is this formation of oil shale, and it's what when you talk about Canadian and the Keystone Pipeline, the oil booms that are happening in North Dakota and Montana. It's this Bakken oil, and the thing about it is those places are packaging the oil, they're shipping it mostly to the East Coast because that's where the prices are higher. But there aren't pipelines going to the East Coast. So over the past 6 years, the amount of crude oil that's being carried on rail lines has something like quintupled.
Right, it's huge.
It's like 400,000 gallons. And I learned that it's the most oil that's gone by rail since 1870. Like since 1870, most of American oil has gone by pipeline, and still most of it is on pipeline. But this has been this huge surge of it, and so since that's happened, there have been multiple train derailments. So just as a practical matter, if you're an emergency manager, 25% of the population of the United States lives within a mile of a railroad line, which means they are within the potential blast radius of a crude oil derailment and an explosion. So this is a likely scenario. This is a hazard that you need to be considering. Tale of two disasters here. So what happened first in Lac Magantic is that, this is a terrible and sort of really sad disaster that changed the way that Quebec operates in lots of cases. The way that this happened was there are these two towns. So imagine two towns. One is up a hill from another, and that one is called Nantes, I think. Let's just admit up front, French Canadian pronunciation, it's not going to be my strong suit.
It's a little weird.
If anybody would like to mock me on Twitter for that, that's totally fine. But the locomotive and the train cars, and we're talking about lots and lots of cars all filled with oil. This is one difference if you've worked on the classic train scenario. So I present this to you as an exercise guy, Andrew. Everybody who's an emergency manager, you always work a train derailment scenario.
Right.
When I was coming up, it was Graniteville, South Carolina, which was a chlorine release. There's always like a Kim release. The difference is Kim release, you're dealing with one train car, two train cars. So with crude oil, you've got like 109 train cars, all of which are filled with flammable oil. So we're in Nantes. And a fire breaks out of a locomotive's exhaust. So there are sparks that are coming out of it. There's some problem with the engine. So they call 911.
The conductors call 911 from the
train. That's right.
Wow.
That's right. The engineer goes, and then the fire department police officer comes to it. And it's actually a citizen that calls 911. So the engineer leaves, a citizen sees sparks coming, they call 911, the guys come to check the train out. So what happens is the fire chief always shuts down the engine before they fight the fire. Makes sense, right? It's a diesel engine, you want to shut it down.
Yeah.
So what happens next is a little controversial because the thing about it is trains, locomotives have compressed air brakes. So if you turn the engine off, the brake system loses power. So there's a couple of debates on this. Like, there is still a handbrake that should be there. Did the engineer forget to pull the handbrake? Or did somebody sabotage the braking system, or did the fire damage that? Whatever happened, they put the fire out. The firefighters then left the scene, handed it off to some maintenance employee guys from the rail company, and then everybody kind of went to sleep. And so this is about 1 o'clock in the morning. The air pressure in the air brake went away, so the train starts to roll downhill. Lac Magantic is about 7 miles away. down this incline.
At the bottom of the hill.
At the bottom of the hill, essentially. And so the locomotive just goes faster and faster, gets to about 100 kilometers an hour, goes into the downtown of this town, and then it hits a curve, right? And here's the thing about train lines. A lot of them go through urban areas. They go through populated areas. And one of the big regulatory pushes is to get trains to route around those areas, right? But in this case, it goes right by a nightclub that was there. The train derails going around this curve, and 63 of the 72 tank cars all derail. And so 9 tank cars were then pulled away, but all of the derailed tank cars were damaged and they had large breaches. So this gets to an important point. These were DOT 11 something train cars. They were old train cars. They didn't have any buffer. They didn't have security. They're the same kind of train cars that carry corn oil or any other kind of stuff. They just happen to have highly flammable crude oil in it. So so when the fire happened, there was a massive explosion. I mean, an intense fireball. You could feel it from a mile and a quarter away. That's how much it was. 47 people eventually were killed in the fires that were there. People were jumping out of nightclubs, jumping out of buildings. People had 2nd and 3rd degree burns. And I could talk a lot about that in regulatory stuff, but I just want to spend a second breaking down the steps of the emergency response, and then we can compare it to the West Virginia one. So in this case, we had about 150 firefighters that were deployed to the scene. They came from all around Quebec. And some of them came from Maine in the United States. And what they did was they contained and prevented the fire from spreading in about 12 hours. So let's just remember that as a metric. So it took them about 12 hours to contain the fire. The local hospital went on code orange, but they didn't really get any seriously injured patients. This is one thing about train derailments that are followed by explosions. You're usually going to have either people who die on arrival, or you'll have some people. We had a few people with 2nd degree burns in this instance. That's it. Then they evacuated about 1,000 people, and the Red Cross established a shelter in a high school. But of that 1,000 people, not all of them went to the shelter, right? You had about 10% that went to the shelter. So you had 2 waves of evacuation. So for practitioners, this is important too. The first 1,000 people were evacuated because of the explosion. Then the second 1,000 were evacuated because of toxic fumes that came about later. One thing about Bakken crude, as opposed to, you know what I'm thinking right now?
What?
Texas tea, black gold.
Bakken crude.
The Bakken hillbillies. Bakken crude is very aromatic as crude oil.
Well, it's very raw, right? It's rough. It's not refined. This is crude. Of course,
exactly.
It's crude oil.
And so you can smell it from a long way away. And so the fumes were toxic. So the second 1,000 people were evacuated then. So the thing about this fire was, although they contained it within, say, 12 hours, the center of the fire was still inaccessible to firefighters after about 20 hours, and there were 5 pools of fire that were still burning. So they brought in new fire retardant foams, they laid down cover, they doused some unexploded cars with water, and so 36 hours later, 2 of the cars were still burning, and there was still an explosion risk. So the fire burned for nearly 2 days on the whole. And then they drew a big circle through the town. If you look online, there's a big circle around this area, and people weren't allowed to go home at that point. People then were trying to see the full extent of the damage. And I don't know. The identification of the victims was very difficult. So again, practice matter. Doing DNA checks for burn victims is very difficult because DNA is damaged. It's really hard to identify. There are these really tragic things you have to do there. 5 of the victims were never found. Dental records were not useful in identifying everybody. So your mortuary planning for something like that is really tough. Also, the fire destroyed a lot of notary offices and public records offices in the town. So a lot of wills and things like that.
I mean, it's like they're carrying bombs through the town.
Yeah.
But no one thinks of this. No one thinks that it's that, the town would never allow a train carrying 109 cars of bombs, but literally, I mean, that's what this is like.
And the worry, you hear a lot or you read a lot in World War II, World War One. There were accidents like this with gunpowder, right?
Yeah.
When they were transporting that across the country. And I worry, I mean, this oil production is just going to increase. That things like this are just going to keep happening. I mean, look at the stats here. 30 buildings were destroyed in the center of the town. 115 businesses were destroyed. This main cafe in the center of the town was destroyed. 3 of its employees were dead. It wiped out 30 buildings in a town.
That's
like
crazy.
That.
Yeah.
It really is. It's incredible. The only other thing to note before we check out the contrary story in West Virginia is that evening they shut down the municipal water supply because there was a leak inside the blast zones. So they had to bring in trucks carrying drinking water, and then they did a boil water advisory that night. So they couldn't drink the water for 2 days after till they restored that. So I mean, it's both a tragic story, and the other thing about it is that the rail company was interviewed early on and immediately tried to blame one of their engineers. They put them on unpaid leave. Because of this thing involving the brakes,
right.
They were sort of blaming the people that had come and checked out. They said the engineers or the firefighters that came didn't understand how to work the brakes of a locomotive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So immediately they're just passing the buck to everything. And that made it a lot worse. They eventually resigned. I think they declared bankruptcy. And the town is still working through this. It's really changed all of Canada's approach to rail safety.
Wow.
So then West Virginia. So this just happened, on the February 17th.
Yeah.
And if you remember, it was freaking freezing that night. It was totally full of, everything was snowed in everywhere. And the difference in this case was, this was a regular train. There were 109 cars carrying fuel oil in this case, 2 locomotives. They were only going at like 30 miles per hour, well under the speed limit. But because the tracks were so cold, the idea is that the metal froze, something like popped and got on top of the tracks, and so the locomotives ran into it, and that's what caused the initial derailment. The other thing was, these cars were a new high security car. So the railroad industry a couple of years ago saw this was a problem, and what they did was they said, look, voluntarily, federal government, you don't have to make us do anything. We're voluntarily going to make rail cars with a double thick wall to protect them so that in a derailment they're not going to burst open. The problem is the double thick wall was only rated to 20 miles per hour. So if a derailment happened, the car's going like 8 miles an hour, great. More than 20, you're still screwed. So that's what happened in this case. It derailed, and it caused, again, a massive fireball. In this case, it took a little while. The train derailment happened on Monday evening, really in the afternoon around 1:30 p.m., and then the leak started, but the loudest explosion happened at 11:30 p.m. that night. That's because, in previous train accidents like this, there's a great article on emergencymanagement.com. This is similar to something that happened in the 70s. And at that time, what happened was the firefighters did what they did in Canada. They went to the blaze, they surrounded it, and they tried to contain it. And that meant that 12 hours later, when there was a massive explosion, the firefighters were usually caught and incinerated in that explosion. But in this case, they were able to evacuate the people. They evacuated, again, about 1,000 residents. I don't know why it's always like 1,000 residents that are getting evacuated. But all the firefighters did was surrounded the cars and just let them burn out.
Wow.
They put some skimmers in the water, but they just decided not to go near it and let it burn because it burned one house down, but the guy escaped. There were no major casualties, and so they watched it burn.
And it looks like, I mean, if this is right, there was only one person treated for potential inhalation, but no other injuries. No deaths, no injuries.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, right?
One injury, I guess.
And it speaks to a couple things. It happened at 1:30, so it's happened at a work time. It didn't happen in a crowded area. It was a rural area. So, again, it argues that...
1:30 a.m., right?
1:30 p.m.
1:30 p.m.
But it argues that it's more of a rural area. That's where you want trains to go because you want it to be able to burn out like this.
Right.
But also the response seems to have been much cleaner. The Red Cross had a shelter set up by, let's see. So it happens at 1:30, okay? already by 2:03, so half an hour later, we had a 1.5-mile zone around the derailment that was already being evacuated. So it was already underway half hours later. The sheriff's department had opened a shelter at the nearby high school by half hour later, and they were starting to transport residents already. They had already notified water systems to close their intakes, which again didn't happen in Canada. They didn't close the intakes for the water system. That's why it was contaminated later. And the governor's office activated its EOC, so the Emergency Operations Center for the whole state was evacuated. This is important too. None of the state reps could get there because the roads were so bad. So the locals were there on their own. But they handled it.
That's very important, right? I mean, as locals, we gotta assume we're the ones responding. We can't automatically depend on help coming from above immediately, right? We need to be prepared to respond on our own.
And the other really important thing is the CSX. So the train was owned by CSX. Okay, so CSX was notified really early on, and what they did was they opened at the scene a community outreach center. And they had it open within 8 hours. So they had it open. Everybody could go there. They could vent. They could ask for recuperation money. They could look at recovery issues. And they were just up and running that night.
That's pretty amazing.
Right.
8 hours.
I know. Yeah. I mean, that's they expected it. Everybody that had done this response in West Virginia had participated in a major train derailment exercise.
Here we go.
Recently, right?
All right.
And they learn and they follow. I mean, this is like textbook. Like I'm reading this, and it really does lay it out point by point, the way you sort of read about it, or the way you do it in sort of test exercises. The other thing is, of those 1,000 people that were affected, how many of them actually went into shelters that night? Trivia question.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing. I'm putting you on
1,000 people were affected?
Yeah. So they evacuated 85.
85.
So that's really close. So that's a really good 10% planning assumption of the people that get into your shelters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they evacuated. Then they let the fuel burn out, again, for safety reasons. And the fuel burned for a long time. It was burning 3 days later. After the boil water advisory was done, it just, I don't know, right? It's just still burning.
I mean, both of these stories, they kind of make me a proponent for the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, there's so many, I mean, just, you're right. I mean, when's the last time you saw a railroad being built? Never. So we're using this antiquated infrastructure. A lot of them do go through major cities. I mean, why not build a pipeline? You can control it. If there's a leak, you can shut it off. I mean, it's segmented, right? So if you got a leak in one spot, you shut it off, contain the leak.
I'm still waiting for my maglev train. When's that going to happen? So I was listening. So there's actually a really great Diane Rehm show on this. I don't know if you know Diane Rehm.
I know Diane Rehm. Come on.
Legendary NPR. And but she did an entire show on train regulation and safety regulations for trains. And they made 2 points. Number one, the Keystone Pipeline wouldn't have affected this issue because it's Canada to New Orleans. And the problem here is that everybody wants this oil to go to the East Coast because that's where we're paying money.
Well, let's build an East Coast pipeline.
So run a pipeline straight through downtown Philly, right through poor old Northeast Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there we go.
They're going to get a pipeline.
With the zombies.
But yeah, it is true. I mean, since the pipelines happened, rail safety is much better because you're not transporting it there. I mean, this is a chaotic thing. And the other thing is nobody knows where the crude oil is. Like the rail companies know when it's being transported, but currently, as I understand it, there's no requirement to let a town know that hundreds of cars full of flammable liquids are driving through them at any time.
It's scary.
So they're working on transportation rules, new cars, new brake systems, and they're working on a new emergency response training center in Pueblo, Colorado, where you can go and learn advanced train derailment techniques.
That's important. I mean, this is also like one of those disasters you don't automatically think about if you're doing a risk assessment. I think train derailment probably isn't high on a lot of people's list, but it's something to keep in your mind. Like, oh, wait, which railroads do I have coming through my town? What are they carrying? Who is the contact with the freight carriers that are coming through my jurisdiction? And
I remember trying to work this problem, and it's really tough because even though CSX coordinates a lot of it, they do it with Amtrak, and nobody owns you can't get a weekly schedule.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a tough thing to track down.
Well, I know just even riding the Amtrak between here, New York City, and Fredericksburg, Richmond, Virginia area, the CSX owns those tracks. And so the freight trains have to share the tracks with the passenger trains. And so, I mean, you've got there, I don't know if they're carrying crude, but they, share the same tracks.
So
Passengers.
So let's sum that up. First off, every time I ride Amtrak, I always carry like a backpack full of flammable crude oil with me.
Right.
That's what I do, just because that's how I roll.
Right.
I think it's one, you've got to exercise this, right? Crude oil is a much different disaster than a chemical is. It's more massive. You've got to integrate the private sector early. They've got to be part of your drills.
Right.
You've got to work with the water systems. Water intake is a massive problem.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to get out behind the desk and meet people in the industry and private sector. Even, public sector contacts are important, but also private sector. Yeah.
The other thing that I would note is, I guess, two things. EMS triage becomes really important in scenarios like this. A lot of local EMS crews, sometimes they're volunteer and they're not used to doing triage where you have to armband people or you have to do kind of a rapid drop and send to a hospital, and hospitals aren't necessarily prepped to handle that. So it's tough to face, but that level of both triage planning and mortuary planning is really important.
Yeah.
I guess that's not a great note to end on, really. If only How to Be Funny covered that. On a lighter note, is this a lighter note? I guess it's a lighter note. It's Will Forte, so
On a lighter note, everyone on Earth is dead, and there's one man remaining, and that's the premise for the Last Man on Earth. And just setting this up, I was reading this article by Colin Dickey, who's an associate professor at National University. He has a couple stats that are pretty interesting. One, a full 1/8 of the U.S. population expected the world to end on December 21st, 2012. You remember this?
That many people?
Yeah. And as of 2013, 41% of Americans believe themselves to be living in the end times, as described by the Bible.
Yeah.
With a full one-third of Americans believing that the current civil war in Syria is a sign of the coming apocalypse.
Really?
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe they're, I don't know. Maybe the world is ending. I don't know.
So
there's a lot of people out there that believe the world is coming to an end.
I certainly believe that.
I guess eventually, right? We're going to burn out. The sun's going to explode. It's all a question of timing,
Yeah.
But anyway, this is a great new show on Fox called Last Man on Earth. One of my favorite comedians, Will Forte, used to be on SNL. He was MacGruber in the MacGruber movie. Just hilarious guy.
Sporting a great beard.
Yeah.
So here's a clip. Where he has a little conversation with God.
Hello, God. First of all, apologies for all the recent masturbation, but I gotta say that's kind of on you. So I just got back from traveling around the country looking for anyone who might have survived the virus. I put up a bunch of signs all over the place saying that I'm here in Tucson. So who knows? And it's not all bad. In the old world, I could never live in a house like this. And these are Hugh Hefner's actual pajamas. Yeah, I washed them. There are some drawbacks. I know you know that. The whole women's situation is the craps. If you could send some my way, or one my way. Oh, one more thing. If you could please send a special thank you to the previous owner of my new house. Just let him know I'm going to take real good care of this place.
And then it cuts to him, playing racquetball with like 15,000 racquetballs
in this mansion. So basically, he's like driving around the country looking for people, and in the process, he stops by Chicago, gets a Michael Jordan jersey. He goes to a bunch of art museums, picks up the best pieces, and he doesn't find anyone. So he really is the last man on Earth.
One thing, he staples Washington crossing the Delaware behind his bed. I feel like that's a creepy pic. I don't want Washington staring at me all night while I sleep.
Yeah, I probably would have left that one in the museum.
Yeah, Well, what do you? So the thing I wanted to talk about. Well, first of all, it's really funny, right?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Just him walking around by himself, dealing with crap is hilarious.
Yes.
Do you think that what he does is an accurate reflection of you as the last man on Earth?
Of me personally?
Well, as of the reasonable man, the
Yeah.
prototypical man.
I think so too. I mean, I think most people would probably have grand ideas of being, all right, this is the situation I'm in. I'm gonna be responsible and figure out what is happening and build up my supplies. But then within too long, I mean, you're just gonna go crazy. You're gonna start talking like. At first, he's making fun of Castaway, the movie, because of Tom Hanks talking to Wilson, and then it like cuts to the next scene, and he's got like 30 volleyballs set up that are his friends that he's having conversations with. So I think it is fairly accurate that best intentions, you're going to take care of it, be responsible, but then suddenly you're stealing Michael Jordan's jersey and making a margarita pool, which actually I think is something that EOC should have. He fills a pool with margarita mix, and then he soaks in that every day.
If you take a bath in a margarita, doesn't that like dry your skin out?
I don't know.
I mean, you know what I mean?
I've never done it,
Are you
so
going
I
to
don't
get
know.
really drunk? I guess we need to do that as an
Should probably
experiment.
try it. Yeah, but he's like laying in it and drinking it
At the same time.
It's so gross.
Yeah, and it's as a hygiene matter. That's really, from a public health perspective, that's genius.
Yeah.
Because it's going to kill all the germs. Here's a quick clip about his obsession with Wilson. And, the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt also made a Wilson joke. So something about Castaway, it's really like stuck in our psyche.
Rough day. Hey, can I have a whiskey? You want a whiskey? Gary? Whiskey? After a while, I give up on life, and I start drinking heavily, and all of a sudden I am talking to every single sports ball there is. Okay, well, does anyone want a whiskey? Greg? Kevin? Anton?
Got Bryce, the soccer ball.
I remember all their names. I forget
Dashiell
who's
is the
who.
blue rubber ball. Yeah.
He goes by Dashiell.
I'm sorry, Dashiell.
He had like 20. He had like 30 balls.
This is
Dashiell.
terrible.
But he never speaks out.
Very polite.
Gary is a little bit difficult to work with. Sometimes he doesn't stay on his mark, sort of rolls off. Jerry's a little flat, performance-wise. Nailed it!
Okay. Cheersies.
So, and the thing I love about those things is that they're like a recurring joke. They don't just go away. They're like
Right.
his companions throughout
the episodes.
The episodes, yeah.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't give anything away, but it's
You're
a
right.
great show, and it's one thing I like about this show is you don't really know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's different than other sitcoms out there because it's of the subject matter. It's a comedy, but how are they going to make a show with one man on Earth? But it's great. They're doing a great job.
I think there are a couple of lessons in there. Like, I think it's totally reasonable that if you're the last person on Earth or whatever, you drive around and you look for other people in an RV.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think it really does handle rational looting well. Like you're going to go and you're going to grab stuff, but is
Right.
it really wrong? With nobody
Well, also
else
he's
is
like
around?
grabbing like supplies he needs, like food and
Right.
fuel, but then he's like, oh, I'm going to grab this Monet from the museum,
Right.
which is totally something I would do. I would definitely do that.
Would it be a Monet? Would you-
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Oh,
Big fan
yeah.
of Monet.
No,
Yeah,
impressionism.
sure.
It's all that.
Yeah.
And but the thing about it is, it's so clean. Like, where are all the bodies in this scenario?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I
Yeah,
was
wonder-
wondering, is that reasonable or under? Because I do think we would do if the world was ending. I mean, one of the last things I would do is I would like bury people I love. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I would want to sort of take care of that.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if sort of that's what happened, or if there were
Yeah,
big
we don't know
funeral
much of his
pyres.
backstory
Yeah.
at this point, so we don't know how this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Was he a loner to begin with and didn't really have loved ones, or was he, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
One of the ads for this was a number of different people in different Fox series saying sort of what they would do in this situation. I think this is Chelsea Peretti.
Chelsea Peretti's in
and,
here. There's
Terry
some other
Crews.
comedians.
I was the
Yep.
last person on Earth.
The first thing I'd do if I found out I was the last person on Earth is hit myself in the head with a coconut until I was rendered unconscious.
Eat all the candy in the candy
No,
shop.
that's a good
I
idea.
would look for my wife because I know she survived. I found some real good food.
I'd probably be like all like Will Smith like and very like just no shirt on in the shower so the ladies could, you know what I'm saying?
Go rummage through everyone's stuff.
And find a pretty sick ride.
Pull-ups, ab workouts, core workouts, run, sleep wherever I feel like.
And we will start the whole civilization all over again by making sweet love.
Sounds like a plan.
I love Terry Crews. Who doesn't want to remake Civilization with Terry
He could,
Crews?
yeah. Seriously, that would be a great Civilization if he was the alpha male in that. So it's on Fox. Watch it Sunday nights. Sunday nights
I mean,
on Fox.
everything's on Hulu
That's
or
true.
Netflix.
Just Hulu it.
Who doesn't know
Who
what?
even has cable?
I know,
So
right?
lame.
I'm gonna get rid of it. I wonder if the show's gonna get less funny as you add other people to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if it becomes like a sitcom, I mean, I just think he should just wander around, talk to balls of different kind all the time, and that would be funny enough for me.
It's pretty great already.
Oh, that was. See, I tried to cue a sound and it didn't work.
You're gonna try it again.
I'm gonna try it again. No,
Okay.
I'm just gonna pause awkwardly for a minute.
Okay.
In How to Be Funny. That
Embrace
was chapter
the
4.
silence. All right, so that's the show. Thank you for listening. We do have a listener suggestion before we wrap up. So Jason sent us this suggestion. I think it's a good one. I think we should do this. He says, consider a segment, something like Boots on the Ground, highlighting AAR, which is After Action Report findings or lessons learned from real-life events or exercises that are easily and inexpensively incorporated into emergency operations plans. I think that's a great suggestion. We should look at some of the ones that are out there on the internet, choose a couple that,
That's right. Coming next time, everybody.
We'll do this next
Boots
time.
on the Ground. Credit to Jason Basher,
Way to go,
who we're going to
Jason.
get on the show sometime.
Yep,
sometime
we'll have
soon.
him in. We'll interview him. But if you have suggestions, if you have questions, if you want to see something on the show, if you don't want to see something on the show that
it's
we
a
have,
it's a podcast,
is
so
it- well,
they're
show
not going to see a lot.
I guess they can see it.
We
Yeah.
could start shooting. We look good,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Let's
come
add
on.
video to
We're
this.
surrounded by beer bottles, and I'm wearing a hoodie.
I think we've conquered the audio element of this, so we should now launch into
That's
video.
our next mountain.
But you can email us at hazardspodcast@gmail.com with anything. Don't forget to review us on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter. Thank you for listening.
Hey, well, here's the thing. If you've made it to, because, we always are like, this is going to be a short show, and it's always 52 minutes long. If you're still listening out there, go to iTunes and review us.
Please.
Like that, honestly, I feel like that I would review us, but I would feel like shameful doing it.
It's
you
like
know what I mean?
retweeting compliments. It's
That's
not
right.
really the thing you do.
Oh, you don't do that? That's,
I don't do.
oh,
no,
okay.
I'm supposed to.
Oh, I don't know that.
10 episodes.
The deuce.
We made it a decade.
Is that the Deca?
One episode a year.